The blizzard battering the windows of my parents' Evanston estate was nothing compared to the chill inside that beige living room. My father, Richard, didn't just hand me the check. He pressed it into my palm with the heavy, suffocating weight of pity. $10,000. He called it an emergency fund, a safety net so I wouldn't have to keep floating aimlessly through life. Across the room, my brother Nathan swirled his scotch and smirked, telling me it was time to stop playing my little computer games and join the real world. They thought they were saving a drowning girl. They had no idea they were insulting the woman who owned the ocean. Before I tell you how a single news broadcast turned this entire room into a graveyard of regrets, drop a comment and let me know. What's the most insulting advice a family member has ever given you? I read every single one. I looked down at the check in my hand. $10,000. The paper felt thin and sharp against my skin like a paper cut waiting to happen. The ink was blue, my father's signature a jagged scrawl of authority that hadn't changed since he used to sign my report cards with a sigh of disappointment. Around me, the living room felt suffocatingly warm. The thermostat cranked up to combat the Chicago winter, turning the air thick and heavy with the scent of pine needles and expensive cloying potpourri. My mother, Susan, was watching me with that tight, expectant smile she wore when she was performing charity. She wanted me to cry. She wanted me to fall into her arms and thank them for saving me from the brink of imaginary destitution. Beside her, my sister-in-law, Alyssa, took a delicate sip of her wine, her eyes scanning me like I was a project that had gone over budget and past deadline. I didn't move. I didn't speak. To an outsider, it might have looked like I was paralyzed by gratitude or shame. But inside my head, the gears were turning with the cold precision of the code I wrote every day. For years, I had asked myself why I kept coming back to this drafty Victorian house in Evanston. Why did I sit in this beige mausoleum of mediocrity and let them treat me like a ghost? I called it the beige house not just because of the walls, but because of their souls. Everything here was about appearance, about the veneer of success. My father, the retired executive. My mother, the socialite. Nathan, the visionary architect. And me, the glitch in their perfect system. I knew exactly what was happening to me in that moment. It wasn't weakness. It was the survivor's invisible chain. When you grow up in a house where love is a currency traded for prestige, you learn to freeze. You learn that speaking up only tightens the knot around your neck. For 29 years, I had learned that my voice didn't matter unless it was echoing their opinions. So I had stopped speaking. I had built a fortress of silence, a survival bunker where I could grow without their toxic sunlight. But tonight, the silence wasn't a shield. It was a trap. A trap I had set for them. I could have thrown the check in my father's face. I could have pulled up my bank app and showed them a balance that would make this entire house look like a rounding error. I could have told them that Nexus Logic wasn't just freelance coding, but the artificial intelligence backbone currently keeping the North American power grid from failing under the weight of the blizzard outside. But I didn't. Because a part of me, the small, stupid part that still wanted a family, needed to know the answer to one question. Could they love Claire? Not Claire the billionaire. Not Claire the savior. Just Claire, the girl in the oversized sweater who supposedly needed help paying her rent. If I told them the truth now, their affection would be bought. It would be a transaction. I needed to see if they were capable of respecting me when they thought I had nothing to offer but myself. I looked up from the check, meeting my father's gaze. His eyes weren't kind, they were impatient. He was waiting for his return on investment. My submission. Thank you, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion they craved. The disappointment in the room was palpable. I hadn't cried. I hadn't performed. I had just absorbed the insult and neutralized it. Nathan let out a short, harsh laugh, the sound of a man who needed someone beneath him to feel tall. Don't spend it all on video games, Claire, he said, swirling his drink. Though honestly, at this point, I don't know if you're qualified to do much else. He set his glass down on the coaster with a heavy thud, signaling that the charity portion of the evening was over. It was time for the main event. His ego. Now, Nathan said, turning his back to me to address the room, let's talk about something that actually matters. The skyline bid. The heat in the room seemed to rise another 10 degrees, stifling and dry, a sharp contrast to the whiteout conditions raging against the window panes. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the frames of the Victorian house, but inside, the only sound that mattered was the drone of my brother's voice. Nathan had moved to the center of the room, claiming the space like it was a stage he had built himself. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, a gesture of casual dominance, and began to speak about his legacy. He wasn't just talking about a building, he was talking about the Chicago skyline bid. It was a massive municipal project intended to redefine the city's waterfront for the next century. Nathan's firm was the frontrunner, or so he claimed. He used words like visionary and monolithic, describing glass structures that would pierce the clouds and reflect the lake. He spoke with the confidence of a man who believed the world existed solely to be reshaped by his hands. My parents watched him with a rapt, hungry attention they had never once offered me. To them, Nathan was the architect of their family status. I was just the tenant. I sat there, the check still burning a hole in my pocket, and waited for him to finish his victory lap. But he wasn't done. He turned his gaze back to me, his expression softening into that patronizing mask of older brother concern that I despised more than his anger. "You know, Claire," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I was thinking about your situation earlier. Before Dad gave you that check. Money is a band-aid, right? It doesn't solve the structural problem." He paused for effect, waiting for me to ask him for the solution. I remained silent. "My executive assistant is overwhelmed right now," he continued, his tone breezy as if he were discussing the weather. "We have mountains of compliance data for the Skyline project that needs to be digitized. It's mindless work, honestly. Just taking numbers from old blueprints and entering them into Excel. But it needs to be done." He took a step closer, offering me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I could bring you on as a contractor. Temporary, obviously. It's just data entry, but you're good at typing, right? You spend all day on that laptop anyway. Might as well make yourself useful." The air left my lungs. Data entry. He was offering the founder of Nexus Logic, a woman who had written the code that currently optimized shipping routes for 40% of the globe's maritime freight, a job typing numbers into a spreadsheet because she was good at typing. It was an insult so precise, so surgically targeted at my professional identity, that it almost commanded respect. Before I could respond, Alyssa chimed in from the sofa, smoothing her skirt. "You really should consider it, Claire," she said, her voice dripping with corporate condescension. "I was looking at your LinkedIn profile the other day and honestly it's a ghost town. You have a 3-year gap since you left that IT job. In PR we call that a career death sentence. Even a data entry role would show future employers that you're employable." The indignation rose in my throat like bile. They didn't just see me as unsuccessful, they saw me as broken. They looked at my silence and saw a void they needed to fill with their own mediocrity. Outside, the storm was burying the city in ice, freezing power lines and stalling trains. Inside, the people who shared my DNA were trying to bury me in their pity. They had no idea that while they were worrying about spreadsheets and LinkedIn gaps, the systems I built were currently the only thing standing between the city's infrastructure and total collapse. I looked at Nathan, then at Alyssa. I forced a small, tight smile onto my face. "I'll think about it," I said. "It sounds like a very important spreadsheet." Nathan nodded, satisfied. He thought he had solved the problem of Claire. He turned back to the window, watching the snow fall, completely unaware that the blizzard wasn't the only force of nature about to crash through his carefully constructed life. The television, an 85-inch monolith mounted above the fireplace, had been playing a loop of holiday commercials on mute, a backdrop of consumer joy that nobody was watching. But then the screen flickered. The cheerful red and green graphics vanished, replaced by the stark, urgent blue of a Bloomberg breaking news alert. "The invisible billionaire, Nexus Logic founder revealed." The bold white text seemed to vibrate against the screen. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Once, twice, then a continuous, frantic vibration that signaled my PR team had lost the battle to keep my identity secret. Nathan was the first to notice. He stopped mid-sentence, his glass halfway to his mouth, his eyes narrowing as he read the Chiron. "Nexus Logic?" he muttered. "Isn't that the supply chain AI? Turn it up," my father commanded, pointing the remote. The volume rose, filling the room with the clipped, urgent voice of the anchor. "Exclusive confirmation tonight regarding the mysterious leadership behind Nexus Logic, the artificial intelligence firm credited with preventing a total collapse of the North American logistics grid during this week's historic blizzard." The screen cut to a graphic showing shipping routes stabilizing in real time, routes optimized by the code I had written at my kitchen table 3 years ago. For years, industry experts have speculated about the identity of the founder, known only as the architect, the reporter continued. Tonight, Bloomberg can confirm that the company is solely owned by 29-year-old Chicago native Claire. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the beat of my own heart, steady and calm. "Claire Anderson," the reporter finished. My high school yearbook photo, the one I hated, flashed on the screen next to a recent paparazzi shot of me exiting my office building in downtown Chicago. Sources close to the deal confirm that Anderson, who retains 100% equity in the company, has just rejected a $1.5 billion acquisition offer from Amazon, stating that she intends to keep Nexus Logic independent to ensure its technology remains focused on critical infrastructure stability. My mother gasped, a sharp intake of breath that sounded like she'd been punched. Alyssa dropped her wine glass. It hit the rug with a dull thud, red liquid spreading like a stain, but nobody moved to clean it. They were frozen, their eyes locked on the screen where a supply chain expert was now explaining the magnitude of what I had built. Without Nexus Logic's predictive rerouting, the expert was saying, We would be looking at power grid failures across 3 states and critical shortages of medical supplies in every major hospital in the Midwest. This isn't just a tech unicorn, it's a survival engine. Claire Anderson hasn't just built a fortune, she's built the safety net for the modern world. I watched them watch the screen. I watched the reality of the world without Claire wash over them. The news report wasn't talking about stock prices or yacht parties. It was talking about survival. It was describing a world where without my work the lights would go out, the heat would fail, and the food wouldn't arrive. Nathan turned to look at me. His face was pale, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. He looked from the TV screen where my name was flashing in billion-dollar letters, to the sister he had just offered a data entry job. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible, a fracture running through his understanding of the world. 1.5 billion, he whispered. Valuation is actually 4.5, I corrected gently, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. The Amazon offer was a low ball. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, the unemployed daughter in the oversized sweater, and watched their entire world tilt on its axis. The data entry offer, the pity check, the lectures on LinkedIn, all of it was instantly incinerated in the blaze of the truth. They realized in that frozen moment that while they were busy judging my silence, I had been busy saving their world. The silence that followed wasn't admiration, it was the shock of a family identity collapsing. For 29 years, I had been the designated failure, the pillar that made everyone else feel generous, needed, or superior. And in one 60-second news clip, that pillar shattered. My parents didn't look proud, they looked sick. My father stared at me not like a relieved parent, but like a king realizing he'd been speaking to someone far above his rank. Their power had always depended on the illusion that I was small. The $10,000 check they'd offered, once a symbol of help, now looked pathetic. I bought the building, Dad, I said. I didn't tell you because I didn't want this, your fear, your greed. I wanted to be your daughter. My mother trembled, unable to reconcile the version of me she pitted with the woman on TV leading a global tech firm. Nathan tried to fight it, but when the news revealed that his rival firm won a major contract because of Nexus Logic, my company, his confidence collapsed. A sister he offered a data entry job had just made him professionally irrelevant. Suddenly they wanted to be a team. They wanted family unity. They wanted access. I picked up the check, tucked it into my father's pocket and said, "Keep it. You'll need it more than I do." I told them the truth. I would have shared everything. My success, my future, my legacy, if they had ever once asked me, "Are you happy?" I walked out into the blizzard lighter than I'd ever felt. Their house no longer felt powerful. It was just a small place filled with people who shared my past but not my future. My real family was the team I'd built, the mission I lived for. I drove away without anger, only clarity. Sometimes you have to outgrow the people who raised you to survive them.